Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're going to have another informative and incredible episode for you guys today. So hopefully you enjoy. Got a couple different topics. I hope, or I don't plan on having any single topic dominate. I think we're just going to go through a lot of different news topics because there's a lot that's been happening over the last few weeks and last week in particular. So we will go over that. The first topic I'm going to talk about is Biden gave a speech or a commencement address at Howard University last weekend where he declared that white supremacy is the most dangerous threat facing America today. And he added, I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking at a black HBCU. And one of the most oddest Biden moments, it's like one of those like casual, like, I don't know if this, is he trying to be racist or not very racist by our standards maybe, but racist by the media standards. You know, you're not supposed to say that, flat out say that. And also black HBCU is redundant because black is in HBCU, historically black college or university. So there's no need to say black HBCU to, emphasize that, but he did that anyway. So this is a bold stand with all the things that we have going on in our country, rising crime, the open border, especially with the Title 42 ending. There seems to be a lot more dangerous threats to America than the phantom white supremacy threat. But that is what the administration thinks. And they asked Alejandro Mayorkas, the DHS secretary, on one of these Sunday shows yesterday, actually. It was like last weekend. Last weekend would work too. And they asked him, is white supremacy the most dangerous thing? He's like, unfortunately, it is true that white supremacy is the most dangerous threat to America. It's a tragedy. Mayorkas talks really weird. I mean, he is like Cuban of background. So, but he just like has this like, I don't know what would be the best way to describe it. But every time I hear him talk, it's like very strange that what he's saying. So, and this is person who's overseeing this massive border crisis, this massive invasion that's happening right now. And they're just trying to say, oh, well, don't focus on that. Focus on white supremacy. So there's a couple things to assess from this. First, when liberals like Biden say white supremacy is the biggest threat, they're not talking about a real ideology. They're simply saying whites are the biggest threat. And when he's saying this at Howard, the crowd understands what he's saying. He's like, this is what it is. And then he tried to tie that into Trump by saying there's some people who are really opposed to you being the future. They don't want to see you as the future. They want to divide people and make people hate. And it's trying to connect this to larger political developments. It's not simply just saying, oh, well, when we say white supremacy, we're just meaning those neo-Nazi terror groups that don't really exist, but we pretend they exist. It's really saying white people are the problem and them like trying to restrict immigration or them getting mad about teaching, Black Lives Matter indoctrination in schools or anti-white racism in schools and getting mad about affirmative action. That is why white supremacy is the biggest threat, because whites just need to get, accept dispossession and, happily move along with it, not refuse and resist it. And that's what they mean by them saying that white supremacy is the biggest threat. They're saying white people are the biggest threat, far more than anything from immigrants. Because, Mayorkas, they don't care about the border crisis. They simply do not care about the border crisis. But we'll go into that in a moment. But this is all part of Biden's campaign pitch, is that saying that these evil white people, the ultra MAGA Republicans, it was the same in that speech he gave last fall before the midterms, where he was warning about the MAGA Republicans and how Trump supporters are the gravest threat. And he had, the dark Brandon backdrop and everything like that. That's part of his campaign message. It's why he's highlighting January 6th. And when he ran for president in 2020, he highlighted Charlottesville. Now, Charlottesville's still part of it, but not the major part. Now it's January 6th. January 6th was, the highlight of his opening campaign ad for 2024. And this is what he's going to be campaigning on, is that these Trump supporters, these white people, white Americans, are a serious threat to you, non-white, new Americans, and you have to unite behind me to prevent them from taking power again and doing all these terrible things that I warn about. We could have January 6th all the time if Trump gets back in power, and that's why you need to support me. and defeat these ultra MAGA Republicans. And he's helped along by media narratives trying to claim that, white supremacy is the number one threat. All these white people going, doing evil things. They're taking away your voting rights, as what they were campaigning on in 2022 is that, if Republicans win the midterms, democracy may be over, and this is what CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post were all saying in the run up to the midterms. And people believe that shit, people do believe this shit. And they do believe that there's like gangs of white supremacists going around lynching people. They believe this stuff, and they can even look at this stuff of like Daniel Penny and other instances like that, and they're like, this is really what's happening. We have a white supremacy problem in America right now. So it riles up the liberal base, and it makes them seem, this is what the real problem is. And it's just an expression of the fundamental anti-white racism that is a defining trait of the left right now. And they can't look at any other problem. They look at the border crisis. That's not a real threat. They look at crime. That's not a real threat because unless it's gangs of white supremacists committing it. Anything else that they look in this country, it's all secondary to the real problem, which is white Americans still having power, still, not accepting the new America, not wanting to do reparations, all these types of things. They view that as the real problem, and that's why they want to crush whites. And that's why they need to make up this fear of white supremacy. Because it's even, despite all their claims saying that white supremacist terrorism is the number one threat, over 3 or 4 years, there hasn't been many white supremacy terror threats. I mean, they just point to January 6th, which wasn't, white supremacists. There was no racial or ethnic animus animating that. It was just people upset about the 2020 election and supporting Trump. That's caused that, but they try to tie that to white nationalism and white supremacy to say that this is the number one threat, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, all these people fundamentally agree that white people are the main problem in America, and them saying white supremacy is the most dangerous terror threat, that's music to their ears. And they've always been saying this, even when, we had serious Islamic terrorism happening, they would still insist that white people are the real problem. And it's still the same with like mass shooters. It's like all whites are the mass shooters, when in fact blacks are the vast majority of mass shooters. When you have a correct definition of it, they sometimes tweak with the definition to say that it's not. But when you have the correct definition of like a mass casualty event, of like somebody shooting and multiple people getting wounded, and that, then it's blacks are overwhelmingly the majority of mass shooters in America. But all that doesn't matter. What matters is blaming white people, and that's why they keep harping on this threat. And it's also useful as a distraction from the massive border invasion that we're seeing right now, which is what I'm going to talk about. We've been talking about this on the podcast, but Title 42 is ending. It ended last week on Thursday, and it's just been pouring in every day. I mean, we've had every day as witness at least 10,000 migrant apprehensions. And you have to remember, these are the ones that they caught. So there's like thousands of others that they did not catch, but this is just 10,000 they've been catching and encountering every day. And if you had May 31 days, so 31, let's say the average, because they're warning that and this was before Title 42 had ended, that the days leading up to it have been 10,000 per day. And they warned that it could get up to 15,000 per day. And so let's say the average is 10,000 per day for May. That would be well over 300,000 migrants. That would be at least 50,000 more migrants encountered than the previous record, which is last December, which was a little over 250,000. So I think 251,000 and some more numbers. And so this is like incredible that this is happening. And I just saw an interview with Jay Johnson, who was DHS secretary under Obama, and he's like, well, I could only, the system could barely handle 1,000 illegal encounters per day. And he's like, I can't imagine what it's like 4,000 per day. But it's not 4,000 per day, it's 10,000 per day, and that number might increase. And they just like can't handle these numbers. Like they don't have already before Title 42. Throughout the Biden administration, Border Patrol has not had enough manpower, and resources to deal with the invasion. They've already been stretched, and now they just have like this that they can't handle. And this is what we're seeing with the craziness is that they'll just say, here's a ticket, show up in court sometime in the future. And some of these guys are getting court dates for 2027, 2035 even. Like they're all getting court dates like past the 2024 election. And they're just said, and that's pretty much just a ticket to stay in America because they'll say, oh, I'm seeking asylum. They're like, oh, okay, well, we'll see whether your asylum case is worth this in 5 or 10 years. And so they get that ticket, and that's their ticket to stay in America to have some legal status. And obviously, Biden isn't deporting any illegals unless they commit a very serious offense. They have to kill someone to get deported. Like they can have multiple DUIs and never be deported. And also the fact is if they're operating in a sanctuary city, they're not going to get deported even if they are committing a serious crime because they don't like to share any. Sanctuary cities don't share any information with ICE. And so this is a full-on invasion. We have to say, we're going to probably have throughout this summer at least 250,000 migrants encountered. Once again, these are the ones we catch. So there's at least 60, generally the numbers go in between, but it's like 70, 80,000 migrants who get away based on those numbers of depending on how much. I mean, these are estimates. They don't know how many are getting away, obviously, because they're not keeping track of that. They just have an estimate, an educated guess of how many are getting away. So this is a full-scale invasion. So, I mean, this is how it has to be seen. I mean, and then Britain had just under 50,000. I think it was it's like a high 40,000 illegal immigrants that came to the country. Now, granted, Britain is a much smaller country than us. It's about like the eighth of the size. I know I could get fact checked. It's actually the ninth or the seventh of the size. Significantly smaller than us. I mean, we have over 300 million people. They don't even have 100 million people. So that is a lot. But 40, and they're an island, so they don't have this experience of everyone jumping the border. It's a little bit harder to get to Britain as an illegal immigrant than it is to get to America. You literally have to cross a channel to get there. And there was a ton of outrage, and this was like one of the biggest concerns. Like people in Britain are really up in arms over this. In America, it's not up in arms, and I don't think it is going to get up in arms either. It's like this, even though this does affect. It's not like any people are immune to this, because I mean, these migrants are then just going throughout the country, and some of them are being placed in certain places. Like in some of them are rural areas, some are cities. A lot of these are red states, so it's not like anyone's immune to this. And you can really see this effect in Texas and Arizona, the border states. I guess in California they don't care, in New Mexico they don't care, but they definitely care in Texas and in Florida, or not Texas, Florida, Texas and Arizona. They say they care in Florida, but that's another issue. And so they have all these people going everywhere. But I don't know how much of an effect it has. I mean, I guess I don't want to be totally blackpilling on this because people always get mad about this. And I'm not trying to blackpill. I'm just trying to say about how people react to this. And right now, Biden was having a border crisis right before the election, right before the midterms. And it wasn't that bad. They didn't have that bad of midterms. I mean, leading up to the midterms, every month had witnessed 200,000 plus illegal encounters. Unprecedented number, highest number. I mean, 2022, fiscal year 2022 had the most encounters of any year on record, and 2023 is obviously going to have the most. Is going to supersede that record. I guess that's something that they have one accomplishment in the Biden administration, and yet, despite all that, they still came out well in the midterms. And I think that's really what they're thinking here, is that they can, this is like a major crisis, it's overwhelming our resources, but what's the political cost? And they think that they're very confident going into 2024. It's like no matter who they put up, whether it's Trump or somebody else, they'll win. And they don't have to worry about immigration because they weren't punished about it in 2024. And even for Republicans, they seem to be more concerned about Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney and trans athletes in girls sports than they do about immigration. Way more attention and way more focus on that stuff. And that's really what I come down to about this culture war stuff. Is like a lot of the culture war stuff is not like about retaking the culture. It's about all over these frivolous ads and all these things that don't really matter to people. And it's getting people hyped up and actually believing that those are the real problems rather than what's the real problem before us. And it's this immigration stuff. And it's like we can't have a country if we have no borders. Trump said this all the time. Everyone knows this. And if we're just going to allow, tens of thousands of migrants to cross into our country every day, like what are we doing here? What are we doing? And this is more important than anything else that's like Dylan Mulvaney or this. But, Biden could probably tell like Dylan Mulvaney or a corporation like, hey, I'm getting a lot of heat over the border. Can you guys do a new sponsorship with Dylan Mulvaney? And I don't know who it would be, like Bed Bath and Beyond. I think they went out of business, but maybe let's Best Buy. Best Buy's still in business. So Best Buy does a marketing partnership with Dylan Mulvaney. And conservatives would drop any focus on immigration to focus on that. And that's like, what do you think's more important? A theoretical Best Buy marketing partnership with Dylan Mulvaney or the border? Obviously the border, but they're going to still focus on this because it's more exciting and gets more views and is more entertaining and titillating than anything that can happen at the border. I guess the border may be more depressing, but it's more important. And there's things that people can do about it. I mean, like Texas is considering taking immigration law into their own hands, where they're able to arrest and deport illegals who cross into the state and say that that's a criminal offense. I think that's an idea that can be pursued. That's an idea that others need to do. And just pressuring the state, the government to do something. I mean, like right now, Republicans are more focused on the debt ceiling than they are on the border crisis. And it's like, nobody gives a shit about the debt ceiling. Literally no one. Just raise it. Who gives a fuck? We're the United States government. We're not, like, we are our own guarantee of paying these debts. Like, we're like, who gives a shit about raising it? Just raise it, but only promise to raise it if Biden does like border security and like agrees to Republican demands on that. There's no reason to fight over the debt ceiling over like spending cuts. Like we don't give a shit about that right now. We care about securing the border, but they're gonna just focus on the debt ceiling more than they will on the border crisis, which is an issue nobody cares about except for Republicans and think tank types. And another thing Republicans need to be talking about talking about deportation is that promising they will deport a ton of illegals once they get into power. And the only one really talking about this is Donald Trump. He is talking about mass deportation all the time. He's like, we're going to have a massive, beautiful mass deportation program. And you really need that because these people, we have, it's tough to say how many, but we've added at least 5 million, probably, I think it's over 6 million now, illegals to this population throughout the Biden years. But we need to change that. That's like way too many. There needs to be push out. And Biden isn't deporting any illegals. He's not deporting anyone. They're not enforcing any of the laws. And really, Republicans need to promise to deport when they get to power. And Republicans just need to be hyper-focused on immigration throughout this time because it's an issue that does well for Republicans. Trump won in 2016 on this, and all the polling showed in 2022 that this issue did very well for Republicans, but instead Republicans focused on trans athletes and girls' sports, which, did not win the election for them. And they focus on things that they're on the opposite end of voters. Voters are a majority of oppose trans athletes and girls' sports, but the vast majority of them don't give a shit about that issue. It's not something that really animates them. But immigration and, the cause that they can see of like these illegals coming to their town, taking up resources, being a burden on them, that's an actual thing that they can see and they'll vote on and vote against the, the invasion. And this is something that Republicans need to be hyper-focused on. This is like something that they need to reverse their fortunes of heading into 2024 and looking like it's going to be bad. They need to reshape the dialogue, reshape the public focus onto immigration as the most important issue and stop being, distracted by, the new company Dylan Mulvaney is being sponsored by. Like, this is not important. This is just entertainment, while immigration is very serious, very real, and very direct to people's lives. And that's really this is like I was thinking about how, like, everything back when Trump first came to office was treated as like a world historic event. And it'd be like, Trump said this about a reporter, and it's like, oh my God, this is like the biggest event in the world. right now we're having a ton of world historic events like happening. Ukraine, the border crisis, all these things that are completely unprecedented, and they're just treated as kind of like, oh well, normal life in the day. While like Trump like insulted a reporter who had been treated as like the invasion of Poland or some sort. So it is just a sidetrack thought, but it's something I think about is like how the media is covering this in other matters compared to how they were covering things in 2017 and how people are relating to it. But it's also coming to I'm bringing up another subject. It's like you have to wonder, is like, why are people not that up in arms about it? Some of it is like Republicans aren't putting as much attention on it as they should. They're not focusing on it as much as they should on other topics. The other thing is like a lot of Americans are content with life in America. And some of those people are on right-wing Twitter. There was a viral tweet over the weekend, which I don't want to hate on it too much, but I did find it was like funny. It was like a viral tweet thread, and this guy goes, and I believe he's in Cape Cod or Martha's Vineyard, and he's like, man, this place is really nice. And you know what? I don't think America's that bad at all. As I went to a New England resort town, and everything's nice here. And it's like, yeah, obviously it's fucking nice in Cape Cod because it's a resort town. It was a dump like a lot of other parts of America or rural parts of America. No one would visit there. And this guy is just like posting these foodie pics. It's like, people are just too black-pilled. Like, check out this waffle I just had. And it's like, yeah. I'm glad you're happy about your waffle. I'm glad you're happy about, having a nice vacation. And it's like, people aren't going to hate on that. It's like, you can still be happy and be fine. But when a lot of the same people are posting this stuff when they just like, oh, why are people doom posting? I just had a great meal in a resort town. And it's like, crab, just because I had crab legs in Cape Cod, now everything's all right. And it's like, yes, you can still experience nice things. You can still be happy. I don't think that's like the point of right-wing Twitter is to make everyone miserable 24/7. Some people end up like that, but this is a straw man. It's just realizing these real problems. But if even dissident right-wing Twitter people can think that all of America's problems aren't that big of a deal because they had crab legs and Cape Cod, there's some. Just think about normies. And why they're like, why aren't they waking up? It's like, because they just had a nice beach trip. Because they had, they experienced a lot of prosperity in their suburb. Or just all these other things that happen. They're able to go to the big game. They are able to watch it on their TV. There's just so much here that they can just, zone out from the real problems, dealing with the great replacement, with the border crisis, with crime, with what's being taught in schools, what the diversity training they're having to do in their businesses. It's insane. Like, any person I know with a real job, some people don't have real jobs. Some of those people include me, as everyone's like, Scott needs to get a real job. It's like, unfortunately, I'm not, due to my background and reputation, I'm not able to have one of those standard 9-to-5 jobs. But I do work, but not a real job. I work, working independently. But for people who like have real jobs in a company, a corporation, every one of those people come and tells me about like how they have to deal with this stupid diversity, equity, inclusion training now. And they all hate it. They all hate this stuff. And this is like something they have to deal with. But a lot of these people they'll be complaining about, they'll be upset. But then they'll have the Cape Cod trip to look forward to. And then they come back. It's like, well, I guess everything's not that bad. And you can still experience nice things. I mean, there's still a lot of natural beauty in America. But I do think that it's not the right move to just say like, well, I experienced this exists, thus everything's okay. And I think that's like a point of that. But it also explains like why normies are so content. If even dissident right wingers can get content over a nice trip, then like just imagine normies and their resistance. And it's not just this one tweet. I don't know. I know it's like a little bit going a little online, but there are a lot of those people, and this is kind of spread to mainstream conservatism where. And in this tweet, this guy's like, this is what rural America is like. And it's not like that. I mean, the places that resort towns of rural America are like this, but the normal rural America is not. And that's not saying that these places are total like hellholes that no one should live in. I'm just saying that there's a lot of problems there. You can see the drug epidemic there. You can see the obesity problem there. You can see a lot of the atomization going on there, and a lot of the economic problems that have been happening. I mean, these places have been hollowed out. And this is a big part of Trump's campaign in 2016. It's like, look at what they've done to real America. Like, look at how these places have been turned into opioidville. This is a real problem that we need to change. And now there's like there's a substantial segment on the right, not just the online right, but within mainstream conservatism, that imagines that these are, utopia where you can have nice pancakes every day and this is awesome and everyone's like nice and fit and healthy and it's just a beautiful town. And there's some places like that and some people may be like that, but it's not, that's not the norm for rural America. It's not the hating on rural America, because there's problems everywhere in America. Suburbs are probably the nicest parts, but the suburbs are not walkable. People don't know each other, and people drive everywhere, and there's a lot of strip malls. Maybe not a lot of beauty, but it's, safe. Maybe your neighborhood could be nice. Your neighbors are nice, but it's not. I mean, rural America is not walkable either at all. Rural America, you have to drive 30 minutes to the grocery store, as opposed to the suburbs, you drive 5 minutes. And contrary to what right-wing Twitter says, is people in rural America still go to the grocery store. They don't grow all their food in their backyard. General point is, and a little sidetracked, is that yes, we can still have a nice life. You can still enjoy these things. That's the truth. And that's why so many middle-class whites are content with the current situation. Because yes, they realize that they can still have a nice life. Yes, they can realize they can have this nice trip. Yes, they realize they can have nice food and, be in a nice area for a little bit. And that's why they're able to shut themselves off from what's happening to the rest of America. But when you open your eyes, you realize that this is like very bad. And only a few people are woken up to this. And the solution is not to, retreat to fantasy and imagine that this resort town that you just experienced is the true America. And that's like what most America is like. It's not just it's just the cities that are really bad, which I always say this, like the cities, depending what city you are in. I mean, Memphis, Baltimore, Detroit, the cities where white people are not, those places are really bad. But there's like a lot of cities that are extremely nice, and they're becoming more libtarded, like Nashville. Austin is like nice in inward parts, but I mean, there's a ton of homeless and a lot of leftists there. Most cities, actually, when you compare to like rural areas, is like there's a reason why people move to cities. There's the things there. It's walkable. It has like the type of people they want to hang out with. I mean, sometimes it may not have the people they don't want to hang out with, but it's like there, and it's like people are not. It's creating this. Fantasy of what like life is like in America, and just imagining it's like, oh, it's just all these urban areas where the liberals are, the bugmen are. The unfortunate fact is generally where the bugmen congregate, even in rural America, are generally the nice places, unfortunately. If you see a bunch of gay pride flags in a small town, it's likely a resort town that's like very nice restaurants, like good seating. But everyone who lives there is a libtard. It's the unfortunate fact. It's like these guys, if you're going to these New England resort towns, they're extremely left-wing. I mean, Burlington, Portland, Maine, Cape Cod, obviously, Martha's Vineyard, all these places are very extremely left-wing that you want to visit. And like, oh, this place is so nice. And then there's like a gay pride flag on every block. And it's even the case with the cities. I mean, sometimes some of the bugmen or whoever, the urbanites, the liberal arts, they live in cities that are turning in shitholes. I mean, due to their own policies. San Francisco is an example. There's a bunch of other examples where their stupid, idiotic policies are turning them into not so nice places. But for the most part, a lot of these places where they live, the bugmen live, are going to be nice places. And it's some of the places that a lot of our people live are not so nice places, which is why they think there are many major problems in their country, because they see illegals being poured into their town. They see that a lot of jobs have gone overseas. They see drugs coming in, and they experience this. They experience that life in America is not so good, and that's why they agree with Trump when he says, like, life in America is very hellish right now. It's like a nightmare. And they understand that, and I don't think it's right for right-wingers to just, pretend that, the real solution is just moving to this idyllic rural town, and then all your problems are solved and everything's nice, and just focus on things. It's like, that's already what middle-class whites are doing, and that's why we're in this situation, because they decided to ignore all these problems and focus on their inner life, which may be nice, but the outer life is getting worse, and They choose to ignore these problems and just focus on the nice trip they have planned ahead and all the great restaurants they're going to eat at. So that was a long-winded discussion on Biden's white supremacy threat, immigration, and retreat pilled, I guess. But now going on to Daniel Penny, which is part of the discussion that we were having about like quality of life, about how this guy who stood up for himself, stood up for other passengers to enforce basic standards of saying we're not going to put up with a guy threatening us who may try to hurt us, and we're going to try to neutralize that threat. And now he's being punished for that. Last week I was still skeptical of whether he would be arrested. Of course, he was arrested. I guess it was pretty obvious he was, based on the evidence. I mean, and tone changed. It's like Eric Adams went from, attacking AOC for rushing a judgment to saying, like, Jordan Neely was one of us. He's our people, and we have to defend this. This is one of the worst things I've ever seen, blah, blah, blah. And he's, like, going in on it. And that city was going to go into it. And it's a Manhattan DA who's like a black power dude. Obviously, he was going to charge this white Marine who looks like he just is an Arno Brecker statue, or is like it looks like when they arrested him, it's such a powerful image of him getting arrested. And it's like these two short, fat cops. And it's like this aristocratic looking. I mean, he's got a nose ring, so maybe not too aristocratic, but in that moment he looked like they were arresting a Teutonic knight of some sort, and they're like marching him along. And it's like it's a very powerful image, I think, for America. It's like, even though one of the cops was, I guess, like Hispanic and the other cop was like white, and it does show this is like we're punishing the Nordic man. We're punishing. I don't know if he's Anglo or not, but we'll just say he's the Anglo-Saxon in this thing. And they're punishing the Anglo-Saxon for standing up for his basic norms, and are arresting him. And he has this stoic, strong face on there. So as a symbolism, it really resonates. I think that's why people kept sharing those photos of just like that. That there was like some interpretation of it as like the guy who is I guess Hispanic or non-white, that one of the cops was like trying to triumphant and try to like angry, is like trying to show he's in power, while the white cop is looking down and looks dismayed that he's having to arrest this guy, while the Daniel Penny is standing stoic and aristocratic and noble looking as he's being marched along. So the arrest in itself is symbolic, and the DA obviously wanted that. They're like, once again, whites are the real problem. It's like, listen here, white man. If you try to step in and intervene with these fights, you're gonna pay the price. And even there was a story over the weekend in New York City where somebody tried to intervene in a fight and got stabbed. So like that's another problem with the harm, is that even if you could get badly hurt or even killed if you intervene in the sites. And the real message is like, we don't want you to intervene at all. We don't want you to set up any standards. But Daniel Penny, being the hero he is, and he was a Marine sergeant, infantry guy, and they say that like a lot of his Marines are willing to back up his character. He is like the guys that we use to fight wars with, and when he tries to be a hero in his homeland, he's punished for it. So we've talked a lot about the Daniel Penny case and what it says. I think the only difference is like now is like who's him being arrested. So I've gone over a lot of that stuff, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. I guess the new angle to go on is that people are using the Daniel Penny thing as a way to signal against cops again, which is once again wildly misplaced. First off, Daniel Penny is not arrested because cops decided he was arrested. He's arrested because the liberal DA said charge him. When the cops detained him, they released him on no charges because they felt, no crime on their own. They felt that no crime had been committed. That was the police's response. And the DA, the liberal black DA, thought differently. So this is them like having to serve the liberal black DA. And you could say like, well, they should stage a revolution and all this stuff. And it's like, look, people always expect cops to like go and assassinate their leaders and people giving orders, when like the people making these demands are the ones sitting and nodding their heads in diversity, equity, inclusion training at their own business. Like, look, you don't go up to your own boss and attack him like physically for having DEI training. You don't say shit to your boss. And you're expecting police officers to like stage a revolution anytime that there's something you don't like. And that the fact that they don't stage a revolution means we should just ban cops and have armed-based militias patrolling these cities when none of these people, that's just not going to happen. So I always get mad when like people want to blame police for Daniel Penny getting arrested. It's like, no, it's Alvin Bragg who got him arrested. It's not the police who made the call. And when it was left up to the police, they released him and felt there was no charges to be made. And it was only the DA doing some extra investigation that made him get arrested. So it's all, and everyone's like, oh, I'm backing the blue. I'm no longer backing the blue. It's like, you are misdirecting your anger and who's at fault here for this instance at just these cops. And people are like, they're just doing their job. Well, they shouldn't be doing their job. It's like, look, you deal with a lot of wokeness and bullshit at your own company. We don't see you like pulling a gun on your boss or, staging an armed revolution during your DEI training. So why are you going to attack these cops for doing something wrong at one moment? And the primary purpose of cops, if we didn't have them, it'd be much worse. It's not like there's some base militia ready to start up. Like, those don't exist. Those don't exist at any moment. And you might say like, well, I know a militia. They're all boomers who just want to sit in their homes. They're not people who are going to go out and patrol. And it's like, anytime like people talk about the vigilante services, like imagine you coming home from your long ass job and then you volunteer basis going to patrol the streets. You're not going to do that. You have to pay people to do that, and the people who do that are police. And I guarantee you that the majority of NYPD is on that guy's side. They realize they deal with this problem day in and day out, and they knew that guy, that Jordan Neely was a criminal, was often assaulted people in the past. They know the story, and that's why they didn't charge him on their own. Police are one of the few right-wing institutions we have in America, like police officers on their own. The real problem is they take orders from terrible liberals, but the blame needs to be put on the mayors and the district attorneys that making them do stupid stuff, not on the police. Sometimes you can blame the police when they're doing something on their own, like maybe they're beating up somebody that they shouldn't or something of that sort. But even police do things like even in DC this week. Actually, this is definitely sidetracked, but I need to go over this once again. Patriot Front shows up in public. Obviously, if people listen, it's like, I think Patriot Front is misguided. It's not stupid. I think these rallies that they do serve no purpose. And they probably do have informants within their ranks, as does every right-wing faction and group, far-right faction and group. But they are not like all FBI agents. But they show up, and there's two things I need to put out of this. They show up again, and once again, conservatives are like, who are these guys? Which conservatives have been doing this for like 3 years, where every time they show up, it's like, who are these guys? It's the feds. And then there's like big accounts that are just like saying like, these guys wear masks. They are definitely FBI agents. And there was one time where somebody's pointing out this case of them getting arrested in Coeur d'Alene. I think this was last year, where they were protesting some pride event. And these guys were still like masked up as they were arrested, as detained. And then they were all given mugshots with their masks off. And then still people are like, oh, the fact that they didn't take the mask off is an indication that they're feds. And anytime they show up, and people use this like cell phones, like these guys are fit, they're young, they look like they are wearing like khakis. This is definitely not true Trump supporters. They would be fat, out of shape, and looking like shit. And it's like, is that like how you want to present yourself? Like, I'm not a fan of Patriot Front. I think these rallies serve no purpose. I think there's much better things they could do rather than doing these stupid rallies. And I don't know. Some of the groups stuff that is like just nonsense. But I don't think they're feds. I think they're misguided but genuine in what they're doing. And there's other instances like police provided protection for them. And the argument always done by right-wingers is that they'll allow them to be attacked and to murdered. It's like, okay, eliminate the police there. Like, the entire city would just like try to attack like Patriot Front wherever they congregate. And there's been times when that's happened, where city residents go after and attack them. So police were providing protection for at least this one right-wing group. And I mean, they just do what they're told. I mean, that's both good and bad. And I think that needs to be established. But they themselves are necessary for society to maintain any semblance of civilization or order. And if we got rid of them, and going into anti-cop stuff is just helping the left, because it allows for more crime, allows for more disorder, and allows for more tax on us. And it's this case with Daniel Penny. It's like, if citizens stand up for them, guess what? Then they'll finally authorize police to do something and crack down on this stuff while they'll like let Jordan Neely's and all these other criminals roam free and do whatever they want. So we're still pro-cop on here, pro-police. We still back the blue on Highly Respected, as should everyone else. Don't help the left's mission by indulging in anti-cop rhetoric because it only serves their interest for them to be in it. And I think people are into this stuff because of the latent libertarianism they have and this like anti-authoritarianism. And even if they claim to be authoritarian, when it comes to actual events, that still comes out. The motivating factors behind the libertarianism is still there. And what do people expect to replace cops with? The base militia and Patriot Front, which you all think are feds? Like, what is going to replace it? You know, so people don't have anything to it. It's probably to be realistic. It's not the cops at fault here. It's Alvin Bragg's fault, and that's where the focus needs to lie. Now on to the matter of what do I think? Will he be convicted? How will his trial go? I would say his chances are better than Derek Chauvin and the guys involved in the Ahmaud Arbery shooting. I would say his chances are better, but I would say that Kyle Rittenhouse's chances were better than his. So I put it in the middle right there, where I'm still saying he has a pretty good chance, but it's not as strong as Rittenhouse. A lot of it is different setting. Rittenhouse was in a place where there's still a substantial number of Republican voters. He had a very conservative judge on his side who was pretty much wanted to dismiss the case, but just didn't do it. He's very much on the side of the defense, and I don't think that's going to be there. I also think there's going to be a more competent prosecutorial team there as well. Now, he may have a very good case depending on what the eyewitnesses say. If the eyewitnesses come out and say, like, Neely attacked me or Neely attacked Daniel Penny, then he has a very good case. But then it's all up to the jurors. And the jurors may be so psyoped by like, oh, evil white man killing innocent black man. And as they want to say with the Biden saying that white supremacy is the greatest threat, they can just see this hulking white Marine who looks like an Arno Brecker statue as the villain. So there's that case. I mean, the good news is that he's getting a ton of legal support. I mean, DeSantis, one of the few good things DeSantis has done lately is he's tweeted out support. Trump's showing support as well. Trump Jr. tweeted out the fundraising, the Give, Send, Go. It's raised over $2 million. He'll find good legal help for himself. The hope is that people don't try to gyp him and steal the money as they did with Rittenhouse. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen there. But I think he'll get a pretty good legal defense team. He'll have a better... But it's all up to what the eyewitnesses say and how the jury pool is in a political situation. I mean, it's also Manhattan's really going to make a firm decision to go after this guy and to convict him. They really want to make an example out of him to, show the white supremacist threat that's all around us, the white people threat as they want to imagine. And he's going to have a tough time with the case, but I don't think it's over. I don't think it's like he's going to jail. Definitely, I think he could still get off. I think he could. I think he still has a case. But if the eyewitnesses just say, "Oh, we warned him not to do this," "Oh, Jordan Neely was no threat. He was about to entertain us with the Michael Jackson song." Unfortunately, Daniel Penny will probably go to jail, but I'm still optimistic. I think his chances are good as long as the he's got eyewitnesses to back him up. As long as there's some jurors on that pool who deal with these violent vagrants all the time and be like, yeah, I deal with this all the time. I know that these people can turn dangerous in a moment's notice. And I think that what Daniel Penny did was right. So I think that's one thing that he's got going for him. And the fact that police released him and didn't charge him when he was first there. So the police found that, a story compelling and true enough to just say, we're not charging you. But then the liberal DA got involved and changed that matters. Now on to the Cotton Elite questions. And we've got a lot today, so that's why I'm getting into them a little bit earlier. And some of them deal with the topics we've talked about before. But as a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the Cotton Elite option at Highly Respected Substack. And that's at highly-respected.substack.com. And make sure to sign up for the IQ supplements while you're there. And if you for some reason don't want to sign up for the IQ supplements, make sure to sign up for the free subscription on Substack, where you can get all my brilliant columns delivered right to your inbox. The first question comes from Cato, and Cato asks is like, over the last half a year or so, I've noticed a lot more people, especially normies, noticing things, namely black crime. Have you noticed this mass noticing, and do you think it will have any tangible effects in time? I think you see that a lot on social media now with the popularity of Steve Saylor and them getting, and also Elon Musk noticing more things. The fact that, the wealthiest person in the world is essentially Sailor posting is a big deal. I do think that people are more, at least on social media, are more willing to engage in these facts. While before they'd be like, oh, well, there's no reason that no blacks don't commit more crime, or they're not committing more murder. I think people are being made more aware of these topics. What tangible effects will that have? It's hard to say. Maybe that will lead to more support for tough on crime policies going into the 2020s and 2030s. But more people are waking up and noticing this stuff, at least on social media. And posts like that get thousands of likes and engagement. And the fact that Elon Musk is engaging in it. And there's kind of a less of a taboo of talking about this in conservatism, especially with the popularity of Steve Saylor. Like, people no longer try to cancel Steve just because he writes for Unz Review and VDare. They're just, everyone's like, whoa, yeah, Steve Saylor, he's telling the truth, which he is. And so I think that's a positive development in noticing. I do think people are, if they're engaged on social media, they're noticing more things. And unfortunately, Tucker's Carlson show also helped people notice things, but it's no longer there. But there still is room for development and room for improvement on that matter of that. So yeah, I think, at least from when it comes to social media and discussion of these topics, you see there's an overwhelmingly, I don't know if overwhelmingly is the right word, but you see a lot more engagement with forbidden topics and noticing than you did before. So I'd agree with that. And I think that's even going into the case of Daniel Penny, which maybe a few years before that people wouldn't have supported him. They're like, oh, why did this white guy do this? But I think now with the awareness of crime facts and what's going on in New York City and other inconvenient truths, that people are more willing to support Daniel Penny now than they would have been maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So that's it for that question. Now we have 2 questions from Dave. Dave's first question asks, are there any white pills about the current border situation? Could it make more robust immigration law more palatable for a GOP Congress and the general public? I think so, because what the border bill that they passed in the House last week, they're claiming that this is the strongest border enforcement bill in history. And probably in modern history probably is, because it's calling for full funding of the border law, or border wall, restricting asylum rules, mandatory e-verify throughout the country, which a lot of these stupid libertarians like Thomas Massey were complaining about. It was a very strong bill, and I think more Republicans are going to and there's no amnesty factor at all in there, which if they had been trying to do this years before, they would have put in some type of amnesty. There's no amnesty in there. So I do think that the type of restrictive immigration laws we want is more palatable to the GOP now than ever before. The problem is that Democrats are more open borders than ever before. It's like Democrats want no solutions. I mean, there's a sizable number of Democrats who don't want anything done on the border. There was over 70 Democrats, I think actually nearly 80 Democrats, who signed a letter back in, I think it was January, when Biden proposed his parole program, which his parole program, every month, 30,000 migrants from 4 respective countries, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Cuba, can all come to the United States under a parole program. And even though it's supposed to be temporary, they can likely stay permanently due to the nature of America's immigration laws and how no one gets deported or leaves. And so this program is there. But under that program, if anyone from those 4 countries shows up at the border, they're immediately deported. And it's not had the effect they've wanted, and there's been challenges to the expedited deportation, and all the things are them just slow walking it. But all these Democrats were furious at this idea that they would have any type of enforcement mechanism to go along with this, and they criticized Biden. They've been calling Biden a deporter and all this stuff. And this is for and they've been criticizing him over something that's allowing more immigrants to come here legally. But the fact that there's any type of enforcement mechanism, they just won't do it. And it's the same. There's been a few cucky Republicans who've proposed some like minor amnesties in exchange for border security, and the majority of Democrats say absolutely not. We will only do amnesty. So that's the real problem. Is not Republicans are getting better on the issue, but Democrats are getting far worse. So there's a much greater degree of polarization on immigration, and that's a big problem if you want to do anything legislatively. But on the other hand, you will see Republicans in 2024 push for serious immigration restrictions that they otherwise would have never done in years past. Now, the second question from Dave is a two-parter, and it's about Trump's town hall and the presidential primary going on. First part is, does Trump's performance at the town hall and the criticism CNN faced make it less likely that the press does Trump town halls and events in the future? And second, what do you make of the DeSantis take on the events in Iowa over the weekend? So the first part, I think CNN's going to be forced to do more of this stuff because they have a new owner, Licht, who is wanting ratings, and he knows that the network is not doing any ratings. And I think a lot of the old media guard is dying. You know, Vice and BuzzFeed are going under. All these major outlets, CNN included, Washington Post, a bunch of others, have had mass layoffs. They are hurting right now. And CNN had its best ratings in a long time with the town hall. And the new owner is going to tell them, like, hey, you are having these town halls. We need the ratings. We're going to get someone better than Kaylin Collins to do that. And it's also a fellow Daily Caller alum, Kaylin Collins. The places we go. It's so funny that people are discovering like Kaylin Collins' old work from back of the Caller. Like, she was primarily editing like slideshows of like girls in bikinis and stuff. Like the seriously hot Syrians we'd allow refuge for, and all that type of stuff. And now she's like a serious reporter. It's kind of fun. She was promoted by management to be a serious reporter in her last few months there, and then she went on to CNN. And the Caller worships the ground she walks on, but she like refuses to acknowledge she ever worked at the Caller or does anything nice for the Caller. But they will like, oh, Caitlin, we worship you. Please come back. We're your biggest fans. And she never acknowledges any of their support, which is kind of funny. But she's moved on in her career. But she's definitely hit a ceiling. They want to give her a primetime show, and I'm like, that's going to be a failure if she ever had a primetime show. And it's also showing that she's not ready to be the network's biggest star with how the town hall was conducted, which anyone who is not personal friends with Caitlin Collins and wanting to suck up to her realize it was a terrible show. That's a funny thing about journalism, is that everyone will pretend that like something is total shit is great just to brown nose and kiss ass and journalism and media, and they'll sometimes do that. But when outside observers see this, and definitely the new ownership of CNN saw this, and I think they're probably going to reconsider giving her a primetime show after how the poor performance at the town hall. But I think they're going to do more of these type of events. They're going to have CNN, MSNBC is not, but CNN is going to do this stuff because they need the ratings. Trump was such a huge gift to them in 2015, 2016, from his whole time, that they need him back. And the network's been weakened. They have new ownership. They've gotten rid of a lot of people. They're going to be forced to interview him and treat him like another presidential candidate, as they would any other presidential candidate. And that's going to be a big help to Trump. And there has been this process of normalizing Trump, which he thought after January 6th, they would never do this. Even I thought they would never do this, because I thought a big problem for Trump running again would be about how he's banned from social media. He's allowed back on Twitter and Facebook, and he's supposed to be back next month. Once his exclusivity deal with Truth Social ends, he's supposed to return back to Twitter and Facebook. So that's no longer a problem. And the media is, in desperation for ratings, is giving him the type of coverage. Maybe not quite the wall-to-wall coverage they gave him in 2015 and 2016, but something close, and that'll be a big benefit to him. So I don't know if they'll do quite another town hall with him, but I think they're going to do more interviews with him. They're going to give him more coverage. They're going to cover his rallies and all this stuff. And at least CNN, MSNBC probably won't. And Fox News will probably have to be forced to do that as well with their struggling ratings after getting rid of Tucker. So I think I think this will all be good for Trump. I think Fox News is definitely going to do. They may have already done town halls with Trump, but they're going to do a lot of town halls with Trump to boost the ratings. And everyone saw the ratings that CNN got that night, and everyone's going to follow, with the exception of MSNBC. They're not going to do that. And even with CNN's host revolting, like the owners just be like, "Fuck you. We need to have a successful product." Now, on the second question of DeSantis getting really worked up about these week's events, I don't think they're anything important. Like, really following being counter way of like politics is like, this is what campaign reporters love. They're like, "Oh, this is a huge event. He made a minor gaffe at this event. This could really change the cycle." No. What happened this week is that Trump canceled an event due to weather concerns. All the DeSantis there were no weather concerns. He was just about to be humiliated by how small a crowd it was, which likely not true. Who knows what the story is? No, it's an error that he probably shouldn't have done. Probably was bad decision to cancel the event, but who cares? And then people are like, DeSantis has a ton of energy now, and he's going up. And really, the only event is more awkward interactions with people. There's a hilarious photo of him open mouth laughing that looks embarrassing. It wasn't a game changer, but DeSantis, the fact of the matter is that a good portion of right-wing Twitter is now rapid response team for Ron DeSantis, whether they're paid or not. They are a rapid response team, and they pretty much all they talk about is DeSantis, and everything he does is the biggest thing ever done. No Republican has ever done this, and everything bad thing that Trump may do, this is the worst thing that no Republican has ever done this before. And that's what we're going to be subjected to for at least another year or several months going into the primary, unfortunately. So, and they're making it all a big deal. It's not important at all. Not important. This is reminding me of any time Trump would make some minor gaffe in 2015 and 2016. They're like, he's done now. And they're always saying oh, I'm sure him canceling a one rally due to a tornado warning is really going to be the final nail in the coffin. The intangibles have not changed. DeSantis still has an awkward personality. He's a terrible stump speaker. He's not charismatic. Trump is great retail politics, great stump speaker. He still has the adoration and support of a majority of Republicans, and his numbers keep going up in the polls. And now the new poll came out. I believe it's from Morning Consult, which they're trying to claim that every polling firm is now paid by Trump, and it shows Trump 40 points ahead of DeSantis. And I think DeSantis is never going to make up that gap because he'd have to create a new personality, and you can't create a new personality at the age of 44. And he's just not. He just doesn't have that magic touch. The town hall last week was a bigger deal than Iowa, and that showed Trump. He still has that magic. He still has that charm. He won. The whole crowd is laughing with him and supporting him the whole time. He's turned all these tough questions about January 6th and the elections and everything else he's doing and his legal troubles into a hour-long comedy fest, joke fest. And he had the whole crowd on his side, and he was owning CNN and owning the reporter, and it was just terrific performance. DeSantis could never do that. DeSantis only does friendly interviews and softball interviews. He could never do a tough interview with CNN. That type of town hall, he get run over, and his awkward personality, his inability to make jokes on the fly, he just doesn't have that. So when you look at the town hall and you look at the possibilities of what DeSantis can do personality-wise and speaking-wise, there's just no comparison. Trump has it. What happened in Iowa is going to be forgotten about in a few days. People would probably, even listening to this on Friday, be like, what is he talking about in Iowa? What Iowa events? Because everyone's going to forget about it at that time, and it's going to make no difference in the polling. And the final question comes from New England Refugee, and it's about what Trump would do on the border if immigration happens. It says, let's just say Trump wins. I believe we can secure the border, but we need to deport many too. What would safe mass legal deportations look like in practice? Could we get through the guild of lawyers? Really, what you just have to do is make a big show of examples. If you really promote the idea that ICE is deporting all illegal immigrants here, and there's a huge roundup at a factory that employs them or something, and you make a big deal, it's this is what's going to happen to you to illegal immigrants. They will self-deport. They will enforcement through attrition, I think is the term. Or what Mitt Romney campaigned on 2012 was really the better ways is self-deportation. Is that if you make life's so difficult in America for illegal immigrants through E-Verify, through denying them benefits, through like random deportations that, just people that they wouldn't have expected to be deported. They will deport on their own. A lot will. And you could see this whole mass exodus because people just like don't want to be, they're living their life and then they're upended and thrown back into Guatemala. They don't want to have that happen to them. They'd rather pick up their stuff and move to Guatemala and have a plan. So I think you just have to make like a big show, big examples of deportations, rounding up, a huge number of them, announcing you're going to have a mass deportation event at a certain weekend, and that'll scare people into self-deporting, a large number of them. And it will also send a message to future border crossers is not to come because we will deport you. And that's really all you have to do. You don't have to literally deport every single one of them because a lot of them will do it on their own. You just have to make an example of it, make it very hard for them to live here. But mass deportation rhetoric is very important because that sends them, makes them worried and anxious and like, I don't know, if Trump wins, I got to get out of here. It's no longer a welcome place for me and we got to go. And just having that reputation is enough to push them out. So that's all you really have to do. It's not, and there'll be lawsuits and stuff, but as long as there's deportations happening and the message is being sent, I think the goal can be accomplished. And that is it for Highly Respected today. That is all the topics we have to discuss. So that is it for the episode. So we're going to have a great IQ supplement later this week and should have some more great articles as well. So be on the lookout for that. So until next time, stay respected.